Chapter 2. Oliver married Eliza in May. After their wedding trip to Philadelphia, they returned to the house he had built for her on Woodson Street. With his great hands he had laid the foundations, burrowed out deep, musty cellars in the earth, and sheeted the tall sides over with smooth trowelings of warm brown plaster. He had very little money, but his strange house grew to the rich modeling of his fantasy. When he had finished, he had something which leaned to the slope of his narrow uphill yard, something with a high, embracing porch in front, and warm rooms where one stepped up and down to the tackings of his whim. He built his house close to the quiet, hilly street. He bedded the loamy soil with flowers. He laid the short walk to the high veranda steps with great square sheets of colored marble. He put a fence of spiked iron between his house and the world. Then, in the cool, long glade of yard that stretched 400 feet behind the house, he planted trees and grapevines, and whatever he touched in that rich fortress of his soul sprang into golden life. As the years passed, the fruit trees, the peach, the plum, the cherry, the apple, grew great and bent beneath their clusters. His grapevines thickened into brawny ropes of brown and coiled down the high wire fences of his lot, and hung in a dense fabric upon his trellises, roping his domain twice around. They climbed the porch into the house and framed the upper windows in thick bowers, and the flowers grew in rioting glory in his yard. The velvet-leaved nasturtium slashed with 100 tawny dyes, the rose, the snowball, the red-cup tulip, and the lily. The honeysuckle drooped its heavy mass upon the fence. Wherever his great hands touched the earth, it grew fruitful for him. For him, the house was the picture of his soul, the garment of his will. But for Eliza, it was a piece of property whose value she shrewdly appraised, a beginning for her hoard. Like all the older children of Major Pentland, she had, since her 20th year, begun the slow accretion of land. From the savings of her small wage as teacher and book agent, she had already purchased 1 or 2 pieces of earth. On one of these, a small lot at the edge of the public square, she persuaded him to build a shop. This he did with his own hands and the labor of 2 Negro men. It was a 2-story shack of brick, with wide wooden steps leading down to the square from a marble porch. Upon this porch, flanking the wooden doors, he placed some marbles. By the door, he put the heavy, simpering figure of an angel. But Eliza was not content with his trade. There was no money in death. People, she thought, died too slowly, and she foresaw that her brother Will, who had begun at 15 as helper in a lumber yard and was now the owner of a tiny business, was destined to become a rich man. So she persuaded Gant to go into partnership with Will Pentland. At the end of a year, however, his patience broke. His tortured egotism leaped from its restraint. He howled that Will, whose business hours were spent chiefly in figuring upon a dirty envelope with a stub of a pencil, paring reflectively his stubby nails, or punning endlessly with a bird-like wink and nod, would ruin them all. Will therefore quietly bought out his partner's interest and moved on toward the accumulation of a fortune, while Oliver returned to isolation and his grimy angels. The strange figure of Oliver Gant cast its famous shadow through the town. Men heard at night and morning the great formula of his curse to Eliza. They saw him plunge to house and shop, They saw him bent above his marbles. They saw him mold in his great hands, with curse and howl, with passionate devotion, the rich texture of his home. They laughed at his wild excess of speech, of feeling, and of gesture. They were silent before the manic fury of his sprees, which occurred almost punctually every 2 months, and lasted 2 or 3 days. They picked him foul and witless from the cobbles, and brought him home, the banker, the policeman, and a burly, devoted Swiss named Jean-Loup, a grimy jeweler who rented a small fenced space among Gant's tombstones. And always they handled him with tender care, feeding something strange and proud and glorious lost in that drunken ruin of Babel. He was a stranger to them. No one, not even Eliza, ever called him by his first name. He was, and remained thereafter, Mr. Gant. And what Eliza endured in pain and fear and glory, no one knew. He breathed over them all his hot lion breath of desire and fury. When he was drunk, her white pursed face, and all the slow octuple movements of her temper, stirred him to red madness. She was at such times in real danger from his assault. She had to lock herself away from him. For from the first, deeper than love, deeper than hate, as deep as the unselfish bones of life, an obscure and final warfare was being waged between them. Eliza wept or was silent to his curse, nagged briefly in retort to his rhetoric, gave like a punched pillow to his lunging drive, and slowly, implacably, had her way. Year by year, above his howl of protest, he did not know how, they gathered in small bits of earth, paid the hated taxes, and put the money that remained into more land. Over the wife, over the mother, the woman of property who was like a man walked slowly forth. In 11 years she bore him 9 children, of whom 6 lived. The first, a girl, died in her 20th month of infant cholera. 2 more died at birth. The others outlived the grim and casual littering. The oldest, a boy, was born in 1885. He was given the name of Steve. The second, born 15 months later, was a girl, Daisy. The next, likewise a girl, Helen, came 3 years later. Then in 1892 came twins, boys, to whom Gant, always with a zest for politics, gave the names of Grover Cleveland and Benjamin Harrison. And the last, Luke, was born 2 years later in 1894. Twice during this period, at intervals of 5 years, Gant's periodic spree lengthened into an unbroken drunkenness that lasted for weeks. He was caught, drowning in the tides of his thirst. Each time Eliza sent him away to take a cure for alcoholism at Richmond. Once Eliza and 4 of her children were sick at the same time with typhoid fever. But during a weary convalescence, she pursed her lips grimly and took them off to Florida. Eliza came through stolidly to victory. As she marched down these enormous years of love and loss, stained with the rich dyes of pain and pride and death, and with the great wild flare of his alien and passionate life, her limbs faltered in the grip of ruin, but she came on, through sickness and emaciation, to victorious strength. She knew there had been glory in it. Insensate and cruel as he had often been, she remembered the enormous beating color of his life, and the lost and stricken thing in him which she would never find. And fear and a speechless pity rose in her when at times she saw the small, uneasy eyes grow still and darken with the foiled and groping hunger of old frustration. Oh, lost.